If you are new to my channel, I encourage you to check out my extensive coverage on the Stephen Kosher case. Stephen has been missing for over 11 years. Foul play is clearly involved, but law enforcement are viewing his disappearance as a walk away. Additionally, I encourage you to check out my detailed analysis videos on Terry Beaver's case, as well as the Elijah Wood case. Click on my playlist tab to view all my videos in chronological order. Recently, I came across the Scott Ratigan case by pure chance. Because only the bare minimum amount of information has been released, I believe content creators have steered clear of reporting on Scott's case. I've tried to dig up as many details as possible on Scott's case. If anyone out there has more information on Scott's case that I missed in this video, or if you have any corrections about what I have stated in this video, please contact me at arrinstoner@yahoo.com. Several weeks ago, I sent most of the important information I am revealing here in this video to the Arlington, Virginia Police Department. I never received a response. Alright, so let's get into this detailed analysis on the Scott Ratigan case. Shortly after 5 p.m. on Friday, January 17th, 2020, a relative of Scott's, I believe this was his sister, entered Scott's bedroom after becoming concerned when Scott had not been heard from. Minutes later, at 5:29 p.m., police and first responders were dispatched to the 800 block of North Randolph Street in Ballston, Virginia, for the report of cardiac arrest. Ballston, Virginia is a neighborhood in Arlington, Virginia, located 20 minutes west of Washington, D.C. First responders arrived at Scott's apartment, which was located inside the AVA Ballston Square apartment complex. They discovered Scott in his bedroom, laying on his bed, and he appeared to be suffering from upper body trauma. Scott was pronounced deceased on scene by paramedics. An autopsy was conducted. The coroner ruled Scott's death a homicide. Some of the dispatch audio recordings from that evening were later revealed to the media.
It's going to be for a 24-year-old male with blood coming from his mouth, hands, and neck. No weapons were seen. There are a total of 4 people in the apartment. Also noted that it smells like bleach.
Hearing this information about Scott's condition at the crime scene, I believe we can safely assume that Scott appears to have been viciously attacked. On top of the blood coming from his neck, there was also trauma to Scott's hands, which were probably defensive wounds, and the blood in his mouth was probably caused by internal bleeding from his organs. A key thing noted in the dispatch recording is that upon entering Scott's apartment, emergency responders stated that the residence smelled of bleach. Obviously, the killer or killers had attempted to clean up the crime scene. With this type of attack, you would think that there would have been blood everywhere, and you would think that first responders would have mentioned the presence of blood all over the apartment, but they didn't. What baffles me is that the original report to police dispatch was for cardiac arrest. Clearly, Scott was suffering from more than just cardiac arrest. If Scott had blood coming from his mouth, neck, and hands, the last thing I would be calling the police to report is cardiac arrest. But we don't have the full picture here, and perhaps there is a rational explanation. We know Scott's sister was one of the 4 people in the apartment that evening when the first responders arrived. The other 3 persons have never been formally identified. I have received information from unverified sources that these additional 3 persons were friends of Scott's sister, who were there to support her during this horrific event. According to someone who was speaking on behalf of Scott's family on WebSleuth, Scott was last seen in his room by himself at some point during the day on January 17, 2020. Additionally, some friends of Scott's stated that the last time they heard from him was around 1 p.m. that day. In online forums, many have questioned why Scott was at his apartment during the day on a Friday instead of being at work. From my understanding, Scott had taken Friday off to maximize his time off due to the upcoming 3-day Martin Luther King holiday weekend. Once again, this is coming from an unverified source. Within a day or two of Scott's death, Arlington police stated that they did not believe there was an ongoing threat to the community. I'm curious how they were able to conclude that this was an isolated attack so early on. Perhaps they made this statement simply to calm the nerves of residents living in that apartment complex. Another thing important to note here is that nothing was reported stolen from the apartment or stolen from Scott, such as his wallet, phone, watch, etc. So a botched robbery or home invasion is kind of out of the question at this point. Reportedly, Scott was living in this 2-bedroom apartment with his sister. There were most assuredly things of value in that apartment, given that there were 2 young, financially successful people living there. Moreover, no reports of robberies, attempted robberies, or sketchy persons lurking about in the halls of the apartment complex had been reported to the police in the months leading up to Scott's murder. After Scott's death, law enforcement went completely silent. I'm talking super silent, folks. It wasn't until almost a year later, on January 15th, 2021, that Arlington police finally released surveillance footage from exterior cameras that showed a person of interest leaving the area around the time of Scott's murder. Yes, you heard that right, a year later. Here is the surveillance footage released by the Arlington Police Department on January 15th, 2021. I want to point out to viewers that this homicide took place in mid-January of 2020. The pandemic was just starting in China, and wearing a mask in public in the US was not a thing whatsoever. So while we may look at this guy wearing a mask now as a common occurrence, keep in mind the time frame that we are dealing with here. I checked the weather report for that day in Ballston, and on Friday, January 17th, 2020, it shows a low of 29 degrees and a high of 40 degrees. Therefore, this guy wearing a mask on the street that day may not have necessarily drawn the attention of passers-by. Along with the release of the surveillance footage a year later, Arlington PD also released a detailed description of the suspect. The suspect seen in the surveillance footage is described as a white male, approximately 5'6" to 5'8" in height, weighing around 150 to 175 pounds, dressed in black, carrying a black backpack, and walking with his feet turned inward, often referred to as a pigeon-toed gait. At this point, I'm sure all of you are asking the same question I asked when I saw this information released in January 2021. Why wasn't this surveillance footage and details released sooner? A year after Scott's murder, Arlington PD is asking for the public to think back a year ago and try to recall someone who dressed like this, walked like this, had this backpack, etc. Most people cannot recall what they did and who they saw yesterday, let alone a year ago. I am certain that this suspect has gotten rid of all these clothes and the backpack by now, as well as the murder weapon and any other evidence. Had they released some footage or photos of this suspect to the public as soon as possible, it's probable someone in that area that day may have seen this suspect. Someone noticed this guy, I am certain of this. But a year later, many of those people who lived at AVA Ballston or were on the street that day have moved on in their lives. They've changed jobs, moved out of state, forgotten all about seeing a pigeon-toed dude dressed like a ninja inside that complex or running/walking down the street. This is why you hear me asking law enforcement to get surveillance footage and details on suspects out to the public as soon as possible, and as much as reasonably possible. Shows like America's Most Wanted have proven what an incredible asset the public is in catching criminals time and time again. America's Most Wanted has been so successful in capturing criminals because the show focuses on getting the known details of the criminal and their crimes out to as many people in the public as possible. Even small details that may seem trivial may end up being what triggers someone's memory and motivates them to call the tip line. Now, one other criticism I have here is that when law enforcement did finally release this footage a year later, they put the camera footage in the wrong order. The stars on this Google map are where the cameras are located, and the numbers inside the stars indicate the correct order in which the suspect was captured on camera that day. The numbers here on the right is the order in which Arlington PD released the footage. I have edited the footage to play in the correct order, and I'm going to play that for you now. I will upload a short video soon of the surveillance footage in correct order, as well as show the footage at various reduced speeds. This area surrounding the apartment complex where this murder took place is packed with corporate buildings and businesses, and there are surveillance cameras everywhere. Along with the surveillance footage that was released on January 15, 2021, Arlington PD also released this single photo of the suspect. This image was taken from a completely different camera angle than the surveillance footage that was released. I went to Google Street View, and I was able to locate the two surveillance cameras that were used to capture the surveillance footage that was released, as well as the camera that was used to capture this single image. Even if there is just a few more seconds of footage of this guy walking around, there could be something discovered in that footage that could help solve this crime. If Scott's case goes unsolved much longer, I am hopeful that Arlington PD will release more footage. Now I want to discuss the apartment complex where Scott Ratigan was living with his sister at the time of his murder. The AVA Ballston Square is an upscale apartment complex in a primarily business district where crimes of this magnitude are unheard of. The complex is 21 stories tall, with roughly 1,000 people living there. The complex is divided into two towers. Scott was reportedly living in the east building, shown here inside the yellow rectangle on this Google Map image. The complex is owned by Avalon Bay Communities. Avalon Bay is the third largest real estate development company in the U.S. Younger renters are attracted to these properties because they are located in downtown areas and they are packed with luxurious amenities. The price for a one-bedroom where Scott was living runs $2,145, and a two-bedroom is around $3,000. From what I have read online about AVA Ballston, the security at the building was next to nothing at the time of Scott's murder. Several tenants of AVA Ballston and persons who have been to AVA Ballston have stated online that getting into the complex is extremely easy. One AVA Ballston tenant took to WebSleuth, posting under the name Patches. In one post, Patches describes the building entrance and exit layout, stating, "There is a front door, then two side doors on opposite sides of the building." Patches goes on to say how easy it is to get into the building, even though there are key fob access points on all the doors. People could definitely tailgate into the building from any of these doors. No one would ever have not held the door for you or ask any questions. In another post, Patches mentions how there was a directory machine near the front door of the building that had all of the tenants' names next to their apartment number. Patches goes on to say that several tenants had complained about this directory because if someone was targeting a tenant, all they would need is their name, and you wouldn't even need to be familiar with the building to find them. In yet another revealing post, Patches states that there weren't any cameras above the first floor. Additionally, at the time of Scott's murder, the key fob readers in the elevators were not programmed, so once you were in the elevators, you had total access to the building. Lastly, Patches states that at the time of Scott's murder, the first floor cameras were possibly not working as there was construction going on. This is extremely important information. Thank you, Patches, wherever you are. I think one thing we can deduce from this information is that the suspect probably didn't use a key fob to access the complex that day, because I am sure Arlington PD have gone back through all the computer records to see who entered the AVA Ballston using a key fob that day and have gotten into contact with those tenants. It's probable the suspect tailgated into the complex, and from that point he either knew his destination already or used the directory to locate Scott's apartment. If Patches is correct about the first floor cameras being down that day, then there were no cameras to track his movements whatsoever inside the complex. Additionally, with no key fob required to use the elevators, there was nothing stopping the suspect from using the elevator to get to Scott's floor. Hopefully, AVA Ballston has upped their game since Scott's murder. You would think with the high rent they are charging, the least Avalon Bay Communities could do is make sure their properties are secured and monitored 24/7. Now, it's not the first time that Avalon Bay Communities has come under fire. In 2017, they were sued by former tenants for violating fire standards and safety procedures, which ended up causing tenants to lose personal property during a 5-alarm fire at their Avalon at Edgewater community in New Jersey. The tenants ended up winning the case and were able to submit a claim for full losses from the fire. Looking at Avalon Bay Community's Better Business Bureau profile, they have a 1.08 out of 5 stars rating from customers and 185 complaints in the last 3 years. Nevertheless, Avalon Bay Communities maintains an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. However, it's important to remember that customer reviews are not used in calculating the rating. To give viewers a better understanding of where the suspect was walking/running that day in relation to the AVA Ballston complex, here is a Google Map image of that area. This building within the yellow rectangle is the AVA Ballston complex. In this surveillance footage, the suspect is walking north on Randolph Street towards the main entrance for AVA Ballston, which is just up ahead on the left. Using the Google Map image, this yellow arrow points the direction the suspect walked on Randolph before turning left towards the entrance of AVA Ballston. In the third and fourth surveillance footage clips, we see the suspect running south on the 700 block of Randolph, which is 1 block south of the AVA Ballston complex, and then he crosses east over Randolph Street via a crosswalk. This brings up some questions about the surveillance footage that Arlington PD have released thus far. Why isn't there footage of the suspect walking north on the 700 block of Randolph towards the 800 block of Randolph? Why isn't there footage of the suspect turning right onto the 800 block of Randolph, running/walking south after exiting the front of the AVA Ballston? The most probable answer is that Arlington PD are withholding this footage for some reason. Another possibility is that the suspect didn't approach the 800 block of Randolph from the 700 block of Randolph. Perhaps he was dropped off on the corner by an accomplice, taxi, or rideshare driver. And perhaps there isn't footage of the suspect exiting the AVA Ballston from the front entrance and turning right onto the 800 block of Randolph because he left through an alternative exit. Remember, Patches stated that besides the front door to the AVA Ballston complex, there were also 2 side doors at the opposite end of the building. From my understanding, the 2 rear exits are located here, where the 2 yellow ovals are on this Google map, but I can't confirm this at this time. According to some of Scott's friends, the last time they heard from Scott was around 1 p.m. that day. The police were dispatched at 5:29 p.m. So if this time frame is accurate, then we are dealing with about a 4-hour window in which the killer pulled off this crime. But is this window of time accurate? We know that the dispatch call log timestamp is accurate at 5:29 p.m. But did friends of Scott genuinely last speak with him around 1 p.m.? Law enforcement are not revealing the precise time of day when this murder took place, and since the timestamps on the surveillance footage have been removed, we are going to have to put in some work to figure out when this suspect walked/ran down this street. Let's break this day down. Given that this is wintertime on the East Coast, the sun sets early. I researched when the daylight hours ended on January 17, 2020 in Ballston, Virginia, and it shows daylight ended at 5:12 p.m. Daylight savings time in Ballston, Virginia doesn't start until March 14th. Therefore, Ballston, Virginia was on standard time on January 17, 2020. Next, let's get the 4 cardinal directions, aka north, south, east, and west, locked in on the Google Map image of the area where the suspect was seen walking/running on surveillance footage. As the sun rises in the east, objects will cast long shadows that extend west. As the sun reaches noon in the sky in the northern hemisphere, shadows will become drastically shorter and be cast in a slightly northwestern direction. As the sun sets in the west, objects will cast long shadows that extend east. So now that we have that down, to calculate the time, we need to capture some images of shadows being cast in the surveillance footage. To make this process easier to understand, I'm going to start with these 2 images of the suspect as they are fleeing the scene, running south on the 700 block of Randolph, and then crossing over the crosswalk on Randolph. I will talk about the calculation for the time frame when the suspect walked on the 800 block of Randolph towards AVA Ballston afterwards. I'm doing this because when the suspect is fleeing the scene on the 700 block of Randolph, the sun is not blocked out by buildings, which makes the shadows more obvious than they are when the suspect is walking towards AVA Ballston. Here is the first image we are going to work with. If you want to work along with me, stop the video here and see how many shadows you can see, and try to determine the direction the shadows are extending towards. I know I missed some, but here's what I came up with. Calculating the time when the suspect was running down the 700 block of Randolph is going to be quite easy because the shadows line up almost precisely with the painted lines in the street, the straight edge of the curb, and the bricks in the street, which I have highlighted with green lines here. In the second photo, taken as the suspect crosses the crosswalk on Randolph, Once again, we see the shadows that are coming off the suspect and the man wearing the suit line up almost perfectly straight with the white crosswalk bars in the street, as well as with the straight edge of the curb. Using this information, we then go back to the overhead Google image view of Randolph Street and draw a shadow line that mirrors the shadow line direction from the first two images. Again, because the shadow lines lined up almost exactly with the white bars in the crosswalk and with the straight edge of the curb, this process is easy. Based off this information, we know that when the suspect is seen on surveillance fleeing the scene on the 700 block of Randolph, the sun was in the southern sky with shadows extending north. To be more precise, the shadows are extending slightly northeastern and extend a distance equivalent to the size of the object casting the shadow. Now comes the fun part. There is a website that is dedicated to recording the angle of the sun at various places in the world at specific times. The website is www.suncalc.org. Okay, so now that we are on the suncalc.org website, in the upper left corner, you enter the location of interest. If you are following along with me, enter 700 North Randolph Street, Arlington, Virginia, 22203. This will take you to this location on the map. Then we simply look back at our reference photo and move our red focus point by holding the left click down on the map and sliding the red focus point to where the suspect crossed the crosswalk on Randolph Street, which is right about here, and then release the left click to lock the red focus point in place. Now that we have the location of the suspect accurately in place, then go back to the upper left section of the suncalc.org website, and just below the location, enter the date of interest, which is January 17, 2020. Now what you'll see are the possible angles of the sun in the sky in Ballston, Virginia on January 17, 2020. Notice that the sunset time states 1712, which is 5:12 p.m. in military time. Comparing this suncalc.org sunset information with the sun graph for Arlington, Virginia data I looked up earlier on Google, we see that they match. So far, so good. Now we need to line up the sun in the same angle that it was in the southern sky at that moment in Ballston on Randolph Street, when the suspect crossed the crosswalk. Let's go back to our reference photo to figure out the most accurate angle. To move the sun into alignment with our shadow line from our reference photo, go to the top of the screen, left click, and hold on the sun icon and drag it to the left to move to an earlier time, or drag it right to move to a later time. In this situation, we need to move the sun icon to the left to bring the sun into alignment with our shadow line. Right about here seems right. Now look in the top left of the screen to see the time in Ballston, Virginia that day when the suspect crossed that crosswalk. I got 12:44 p.m., but you may get a time range of 12:40 p.m. to 12:50 p.m. Nevertheless, this gives us a fairly accurate 10-minute window of time when the suspect was caught on surveillance running down the 700 block of Randolph and crossed over that crosswalk. Just to make everything crystal clear, next to the time you will see UTC-5. UTC stands for Universal Time Coordinated. The -5 is stating that Ballston, Virginia on January 17, 2020 was 5 hours behind the UTC time standard, which is located in Greenwich, England. So now this leaves us with the million-dollar question. How is it possible that friends of Scott were last in contact with Scott at 1 p.m., who is presumed to have been in his bedroom several floors up in the East Tower at that time? So either Scott's friend's time frame is off, or this person seen on surveillance footage didn't have anything to do with Scott's murder. We know that whoever took Scott's life took some time to clean up the crime scene, and we know that Scott lived several floors up in the East Tower. Even if we give Scott's friends 30 minutes of leeway time, let's say it was 12:30 p.m. instead of 1 p.m. when they were last in contact with him. That only leaves 10 minutes for the suspect to attack Scott, clean up the crime scene, exit Scott's apartment, get to the elevator, take the elevator down to the first floor, exit the building, and get to the 700 block of Randolph running pigeon-toed style. Sorry, but that's not happening. So now let's try to figure out what time the suspect was seen on the 800 block of Randolph that day, walking towards the entrance to AVA Ballston. Maybe this will give us a better understanding of the actual time frame in which Scott was attacked.
Unfortunately, when the suspect was walking towards AVA Ballston, there were several buildings blocking out the sun. However, for a moment here, when the suspect walks between buildings, we can see his shadow cast. The shadow gives us something to work with, but it's not going to be enough to give us the ability to calculate the time as accurately as we did in the previous images. Because the sun is blocked out by the buildings to the east, with long shadows being cast to the northwest, we automatically know that it's before noon. Remember, when it's noon in Ballston on January 17, 2020, the sun is in the southern sky casting short shadows slightly northwest. Here in this image, we can see that the suspect's shadow is rather lengthy, about the size of the suspect doubled, which is not the length you would see if it were close to noon. One thing we can do is use the straight edge of the curb to help line up the angle of the shadow cast at that moment on January 17, 2020. I'm not convinced that this will give us the accurate time due to the camera angle. However, I believe it will give us a rough estimate. Using a white sheet of paper and a ruler, I create two lines representing the shadow and the straight edge of the curb. Then I mark the curb as line A and the shadow as line B. Then I go to suncalc.org and line up line A with the angle of the curb at the exact location on Randolph Street where the suspect was walking. I then move the sun location dial and its corresponding shadow line into alignment with the angle of line B. This gives me a time of 11:01 a.m. Let's say our calculation may be off 30 minutes either way. So we're looking at a time frame from 10:31 a.m. to 11:31 a.m. when the suspect is walking north on the 800 block of Randolph towards Scott's apartment. Based off the surveillance footage that has been released thus far, here is the time frame in which this suspect may have carried out the attack on Scott Ratigan. Now let's take a look at the clothes the suspect was wearing that day. We'll start with the hoodie. This hoodie is made by North Face. I believe this is the Apex Bionic series or the Apex Riser series. This hoodie goes for around $170. Moving on to the backpack. The suspect's backpack is also made by North Face and appears to be their Recon model. This backpack goes for a little over $100. One thing that most of you will have noticed is that the suspect used black duct tape to cover the area where the North Face logo is located on this backpack. The fact that this suspect took the time to cover the North Face logo on the backpack with duct tape means that North Face may be a brand this person strongly identifies with and frequently purchases. Another possibility is that they duct taped the backpack because it's a customized North Face backpack with a sports team, college, or corporate logo. Alternatively, he may have covered this area because there is an embroidered name or patch that could possibly identify him. Whatever it is, the suspect believed that it was something that could be used to identify him, and therefore they needed to conceal it. The shoes the suspect is wearing in the surveillance footage are dark Nike free runs, either a dark blue or black. Notice the Nike swoosh on the side has either been blacked out with a marker, or possibly these were a series of Nike free runs that had a dark Nike swoosh. These shoes sell for around $100. The gloves the suspect is wearing appear to be the men's Under Armour Cold Gear Liner 2.0 gloves. These sell for around $40. One thing to note here about the gloves is that they do not appear to have any visible stains. However, the suspect is clenching his fists so tight as he flees the scene that it's possible there were stains on the palms of the gloves that are not visible. Something else worth mentioning is that as the suspect heads towards Scott's apartment, he has his hands in his pockets the entire time. Also, notice that the suspect's clothing appears to be new. There isn't the wear and tear you normally see on items that have been worn for a while. Overall, everything the suspect is wearing is fairly expensive. We're talking easily over $500 worth of merchandise here. Your average person is not going to spend this much on merchandise that they know will be disposed of in a matter of days or weeks. This leads me to believe that the suspect comes from a wealthy background, or makes above average pay at their job, or they received a substantial amount of money to carry out this attack, or some combination of these things. Now let's take a closer look at the suspect's strange gait. Arlington PD have stated that the suspect had a pigeon-toed gait at the time of the attack. I have spoken with some medical and fitness professionals and I've showed them the footage. They all unanimously agree that they believe this gait is real. I would like to hear what an expert podiatrist thinks about this suspect's gait. I'm certain that Arlington PD have had several specialists look at this suspect's gait over the last year and a half, and it appears they are leaning towards this suspect's gait being real and not faked. Look at the following side-by-side photos I put together. This first image is of the suspect's right foot pushing off while walking towards AVA Ballston that morning, and then while fleeing the scene in the afternoon. And here is a side-by-side photo of their left foot pushing off while walking towards the AVA Ballston that morning and while fleeing the scene in the afternoon. I just don't think someone could fake this gait and remain this consistent. I've spent several hours going frame by frame through the surveillance footage. In some of the frames, I was able to capture the suspect's face as the mask clung tightly to their face, revealing some of their features. Notice the suspect's large, jutting chin. It's what some might consider a Jay Leno-style chin. Additionally, their nose appears to be wide and large. Based off the surveillance footage and details that have been released thus far from Arlington PD, here is the profile of the suspect. The suspect is a light-skinned adult male. They are 5'6" to 5'8". At the time of Scott's murder, the suspect weighed approximately 150 to 175 pounds. The suspect may have dramatically lost weight or gained weight in the year and a half since Scott's murder. This suspect probably had what's commonly referred to as a pigeon-toed gait at the time of Scott's murder. It's possible this was faked. If they do in fact have this pigeon-toed gait, then this person may have gone to physical therapy or taken extreme measures to cover up or adjust his gait over the last year and a half since Scott's murder. I believe this suspect has above-average intelligence and appears to have excellent organizational and logistic skills. The suspect appears to be familiar with the area and possibly the layout of AVA Ballston as well. Either they knew Scott personally and had been to his place before, or the suspect spent time in the weeks, possibly months, leading up to Scott's murder to case this location. The suspect keeps his head down in the surveillance footage, never glancing upwards towards where the cameras are located and never glancing about making eye contact with persons on the street. He knows where he is going, he knows there are cameras, and he knows why he is there. Lastly, I want to encourage all my viewers to head over to the Instagram account that has been set up for Scott, titled Justice for Scott Ratigan. There you can view several photos of Scott, as well as some messages posted from his friends and family about Scott, and there are also a few videos. I will close out this video with a very important message that was posted on Justice for Scott Ratigan. We are not asking you to determine if someone you know could have been involved in Scott's murder or not. We are simply asking you to make the call to Arlington PD with the names of those who fit the description. We implore you to please not overthink this or make any determinations about a person. Please just call and give Arlington PD the names of people who you know who fit this description. We firmly believe that solving this case will take a village. We need help solving this case. Please take the initiative to help. Scotty and his family absolutely deserve your help. If you have any information on this case, please come forward and contact Arlington PD. you can contact the Arlington County Police Department unit at 703-228-4180 or email them at acpdtipline@arlingtonva.us. A $25,000 reward has been offered. And of course, if you do not feel comfortable contacting the police, you can contact me at arrinstoner@yahoo.com. You can remain completely anonymous. Thank you so much for checking out this detailed analysis on the Scott Ratigan case. If you enjoyed this content, drop me a like and subscribe to my channel for future updates on the Stephen Kosher case, as well as other cases from time to time.